So probably no book on team culture has impacted me more than The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, who we had the podcast on episodes 245 and 246. We also actually, way back when, in the 50s, Nate and I just unpacked. We discussed The Culture Code for like 4 episodes. That's how much we loved it. And I think we've only done that with one other book, which is Jennifer Garvey Berger's Unlocking Leadership Mind Traps book. So you can see how much I loved Coyle's book, The Culture Code. Well, Coyle's book, Flourish, phenomenal. And when I heard he had the new book coming out, I shot him an email right away before I even had read it. I wanted to get him on the podcast to talk about it. And then as I was reading it, I was getting even more excited for my conversation with Cole because it deeply resonates so much with my work recently in team facilitation. So I do a lot of executive coaching, one-on-one, often mostly virtual, but then I also go oftentimes and facilitate with groups and teams. I do that at our leadership retreat, which is, in April, at the end of April in 2026. We try to run those once or twice a year. I also facilitate in team offsites for elite sports teams and also corporate teams, like a sales team at Google recently. And I also do facilitation and group coaching sessions at conferences. Like you might get a bunch of random coaches or leaders in a room or athletic directors, and I facilitate there. Anyways, what really resonates with me about the book Flourish is around creating special teams, creating, special moments comes down to us creating spaces, not safe spaces, brave spaces. We'll talk more about that in the second part of my conversation with Daniel Coyle. But in today's conversation with New York Times bestselling author Daniel Coyle, it's still going to be wide-ranging. We're going to explore flourishing, a concept that he sees as distinct from, yet rooted in, his earlier work on culture and talent. He's going to share about patterns he found in thriving communities and cultures and how coaches can become architects, how we can become architects for meaningful moments for their teams. Really simple, right? You don't need a course on facilitation because Coyle is going to give us some very simple, practical ways we can do that. He's drawing on examples from a Vermont town that produced 11 Olympians. That was one of my favorite stories in the book. To the New England Patriots exercise, to a $90 million deli in Michigan. He's talking about all these different little cool cultures to illustrate how small deliberate actions by leaders can transform the relational landscape of a team. We're tackling emptiness, hero stories, how mattering is more important than belonging, the importance of the pause and slowing down, and how we can co-create meaning. By the end of this episode, you are going to have some very simple, straightforward actions with your team. I promise you that. You're going to have an activity that you go and do with your team to create that connection. You're going to have a process that you can implement with your team on a daily level. And then you're going to have an action or a behavior that you can take as a leader to improve your team by the end of the episode. So once again, don't forget to get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast by subscribing to the newsletter at tocculture.com. All right, that's it. I'll shut up and let's get right into my conversation with Daniel Coyle. All right, Dan, so I want to start today with a question. I've been a big fan of your books. I've read The Culture Code, Talent Code multiple times. This one was great. I've actually listened to it and read it already in just the last few weeks. This book's different, though, to me. It starts and finishes with a personal story as you're talking about flourishing. And I'm really curious, if that personal story made it feel like the book was more personal for you. Like, what was the most important part for you in writing this book?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's like you get to the point, I think we have as a society and as a group, one of the things that has sort of become clear to me is this gap between performance and actual life, success, performing, stuff that you can see on paper, kind of worldly success, and then the inner life, the spiritual life, you could call it that. You can call it fulfillment. You can call it joy. You can call it deep relationships. You can call it whatever you want, but it's like the stuff that you think about as you get older and as your kids grow up and they get old and they move on, like my kids have, and as your parents get older, and it's just like these big life questions started to loom and become more mysterious to me, because I think we're surrounded in our culture, and especially in performance culture, by examples of people who get this wrong. Like by tons of examples of people who are performing at the very top level. And I encountered that quite a bit because I'm hanging out with top performers all the time. And I see how goofed up they are by some things. And especially in business. Like if you want to go, I think the strangest gatherings you can go to are ones of super rich people, because it's like they've succeeded on paper and they've got all the trappings of success. And yet as human beings, I mean, they're not great, right? They're not, there is something about, I think where we've, I felt like personally, like there's stuff I had forgotten about what it was like to live a fulfilling life. And I felt myself wanting to remember that, you know, wanting to reconnect with it. And the immediate cause that my parents both passed away, that kind of got me thinking about that. And then as I was also seeing this in the people that I was around, like, look, these people are successful in every way, but there's something, I've heard it called the emptiness epidemic, kind of a modern experience that we all have, that we're busier than ever. We're more connected than ever. We have a wealth of information at our fingertips. We can answer any question that we desire in seconds. We've got advantages that our ancestors would look at us and say, you guys are gods. You are living in this incredible world. And yet a lot of people that are around us are walking around a little anxious, maybe a little bummed out. What's going on with that? Like, that's a profound mystery. And so all that stuff added up to a curiosity about places that were joyous, happy, fulfilled. One of the first places I encountered was that little town in Norwich, Vermont, where they produced 11 Olympians, and they all go back there to live afterwards. And they work as teachers and as chiropractors. And it's like, oh my God, that's so cool. I want to know what's going on there. And so my usual move is to try to look for the machinery beneath the magic, right? These places seem magical, and but there's something going on there, as you know. Like, it looks like magic, but it's not actually magic. Like, there's a thing that's creating that. It's really a sense of community.
Yeah, and I imagine that, like, the start of this project, like you said, mentioned your parents passed away, and then it's kind of maybe coming around COVID, a little bit out of COVID. You start the research for this project, and yet, we even off air we were talking about timeliness, right? Timeliness of things. How is this book so timely for you as a human?
In the end of the day, I think it connected me down to a deep truth, which is that we only become our best selves through other people. We live in a culture that glorifies individualism, but I feel like we're kind of waking up from that a little bit. I hear people say we're in late capitalism. I think we're also in late individualism. And yet everything in our society, we're graded alone in school, we're promoted alone. Everything we learn is how to be a better individual. And yet when you really get down to it, it is our relationships with other people. And when I reflect for a second on my own life, and when you reflect on your life and your listeners reflect on their lives, it's like every hero story, just scratch it a little bit and look half an inch underneath that hero story. What you find is a community every single time. A community, meaning people who are serving each other, people who are deeply connected to each other, people who are taking on these little projects and on faith, and picking these little messy aspirational projects that is creating growth. Like, at the end of the day, like, the thing that really captivated me about Flourishing is that it's a living system. It's a way of understanding how living systems operate. And we're not machines, despite the fact that our culture kind of says, well, you're all about your strategy and your analysis, and you should decide your way forward and choose your way forward in life. All that is partly true, but living systems are different than machines, and they operate by a different set of rules. And so uncovering what those rules are was a really fascinating expedition. Like, it was fun to see, oh, wait a minute. They're all serving each other in this way. Like, why is that? Why are they all so helpful to each other? These little curiosities that we normally think of through a moral lens, like, oh, we see a community that is all about serving each other, and we sort of think, oh, they must have very good hearts, and they must be very nice people, and they're different than me. And in fact, when you sort of dig into the principles underneath, they're doing kind of what we're pre-wired to do. Like, if you and I were to do a contest separately, we would have, and our brains were wired up to see how they responded. If I win alone or you win alone, they would light up a certain amount. But if we cooperate and learn together, they light up more. They light up more. Shared improvement is more powerful than self-improvement. Shared success is more powerful than solo success. And so these places were kind of unlocking the mechanism through which that can happen.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was scratching a deep curiosity you had around what you were observing in the world, which I might frame as languishing rather than flourishing. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I think I don't. Maybe I even heard Adam Grant use that around COVID, like that term. Like, we're in a state of languishing. I think you wrote an article in the New York Times or something like that about it.
Totally.
So, and so it was scratching a deep curiosity around what you were observing in others, and within great teams. And I'm wondering if when you looked at the culture code, that was studying great teams. How's this different? How is this different?
Yeah.
Like, is this expanding upon, the safety and the vulnerability and the connection, the belonging, all those things that you talked about there? Or,
Yeah, it
or
is.
it something? Yeah, it is. Okay.
It's not there. It's a deeper exploration of those same things. And it kind of, and it came from what I observed in some of those top performing teams that kind of fell apart. Some of those top performing teams struggled to keep that going. And you often find this with the focus on performance, and it makes me think of the SEALs a little bit. Their culture is great in some ways, but in some ways they really struggle. They really struggle with some bad actors and some bad behaviors at times. And so, what keeps it going? What keeps an organization like that thriving and sustained? And when you sort of go a little bit deeper, this book is more of an exploration of the deep things that drive those high performing groups, that go beyond the performance, that go into who they are and how they behave.
Is there a difference between flourishing and thriving?
Not really. I don't think so. I think those two are kind of interchangeable. They're both words from the natural world. They both imply kind of a surprising growth, a blooming, if you will, and a certain messiness that I think a machine can't do. One good litmus test is, can a machine do it? Like, you take your computer out in the yard, does it get any smarter? But you do the same with a kid or a team or something like that. And this living systems operate different than machines.
What was the question that really drove this? If you had to summarize that in like one or two lines, what's that big question you were trying to answer with this book?
Aliveness. Like, where does that, I've sensed that in my own life, and I'm sure you and your listeners have too. Like, there are these moments in our life where we feel deeply connected and deeply vital, and the world seems deeper and richer and more filled with potential. And those moments, and everybody's got some of them, right? Everybody can reflect on a time in their life where they felt that. What's that made of? That was the question that I asked myself. What is that? Just chemistry and random luck and fate? Or are there certain conditions that are in place during that time? When you ask people about a time in their life when they flourished, you'll find that people will tell you a really strikingly similar story.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I noticed. Like, they'll tell a story that's a little bit about, a lot of people will say, oh man, yeah, when I was young, I went to this camp. They'll say that. I went to this camp. And at the camp, we were just thrown together in this crappy bunkhouse, right? We were just thrown together. And then we had all these activities that nobody really wanted to do, but they were actually incredible activities that changed my life. And the relationships I formed in that crappy bunkhouse are still my best friends in the world. And those 3 weeks every summer were totally magical. Okay, what's going on there, right? What is that? What's happening to your attention during those times? What's happening, vulnerability speaking? What's happening to your sense of connection and relationships? And in all these places, they're building meaningful moments. And we typically think of meaning as like almost like the meaning of a sentence, like there's a code there and there's some information I'm going to get. But that's not what they're creating there. They're creating these moments of resonance, these moments where your attention is widening out to look at things much bigger than yourself, where a good word is mattering, like moments of mattering, where you're seeing inherent value in other people, of who they are really down deep, and you're connecting to something bigger than yourself. And whether that's, you and me in some crummy camp when we're 14 years old, I'm seeing value in you, you're seeing value in me. We're thrown together in this big world that we have to navigate together and messily explore together. That's the kind of moments that these places are skilled at creating, where they're good at pausing. That's the thing I noticed. Like, in this world where we try to race and go fast and get more information and, deliver more direction, we live in a world that's addicted to answers, where we get answers and go faster. And these places, that was another deep mystery to me. They kept pausing. Like they kept having all these pauses where they would stop and look and think together about what really mattered. And those pauses ended up being like the most powerful, productive thing, And that to me was just a wonderful mystery. What's going on during that pause? What exactly is being accomplished during that moment where nothing seems to be happening?
I want to come back to the pausing thing in a second. So we're going to hold that thought real quick. You said something about mattering that really just resonates with me.
Yeah.
An organization that I love to follow. They wrote a beautiful blog called Gaping Void, and they actually had an article maybe 2-3 months ago about the difference between mattering and belonging, and how actually people really want to feel like they matter, not just like they belong. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about what your perspective from the organizations you've seen.
From organizations, I've seen belonging sort of, I don't want to say like operationalized in ways that are, belonging implies that there is someone more powerful who is delivering the belonging cue. Belonging implies sometimes that that there's some kind of a power differential where I'm going to make you welcome and I'm going to protect you, right? Like, oh, we belong here and I'll let you know when you belong. Mattering is a click more intimate. Mattering is two signals, not just, hey, you belong here. It's, I see inherent value in you, JP. I see there's something about you. You have, just because of who you are, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, and you're giving me the benefit of the doubt that you have something valuable. You are valuable, you in yourself. And then we're going to create a space where we can contribute to something bigger than ourselves. We're going to contribute value to that. So it's not just sort of being nice, and it's not just sort of saying you'll be safe here, or we share a future. It's sort of dialing in a little bit tighter and saying, hey, and a little more active. Mattering is a little more active, I would say. It's saying, hey, I see the value. We're automatically, we're both here. Let's talk, and let's talk about where we want to go together.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of coaches that I work with and know out there in college, pros, high school level, and what you're seeing is they're maybe creating cultures where everyone feels like they belong, but they're missing the mattering. And at the end of the day, when people are on a team, they actually want to know that their contribution is going to help them be successful, right? They didn't just join a club, right? Like, I think when you're a part of a team, there's a goal, there's a shared purpose, and there's a mission, and people want to know if you took me out of it, we may not be as successful, right?
Exactly.
Like, I think people want to know that, right?
That contribution piece is so key, and it doesn't take much to throw it out there, right? It doesn't take much to create that. It takes a coach, well, like the New Zealand All Blacks do. They will let the players organize practice once a week, right? They'll and it's obviously messy. There's a better way to do it, right? The coaches should maintain control, but they don't. Having the players organize it says, we need your contribution. That ask for contribution, saying, I saw it. I visited a deli in Michigan, and on the orientation day, and this deli has gone from being a one-room deli to being a $90 million community of businesses. It's this extraordinary example of flourishing and thriving. And on the first day, the CEO tells the new employees at orientation, and again, it's orientation. Like, normal orientation is, I'm going to tell you what you need to be successful here. I'm going to transmit all the key information, and I will orient you. He flips it. He says, oh, we're so glad you guys are here. You got fresh eyes. So many of our systems are imperfect. Like, we're not perfect. So many of our systems need you. So please keep your eyes open and let us know. And it took 10 seconds. It was nothing. But if you had a new person on your team, the coaching version of that is really simple, right? It's exactly the same. You just say, hey, I'm so glad to have your fresh eyes here. You're going to notice stuff that we do with our drills, and you've been other places. You've got value to bring. We all need to contribute. And I see that opening. There's a phrase, creating space. And I've always thought that phrase was kind of groovy. Like, oh, I'm going to create space and hold space. That's exactly what these guys are doing. I hate to say it, but it is a perfectly accurate way. I mean, Steve Kerr, I lived part of the year in Ohio, and I still remember the time when, I think it was when the Warriors, the first time they beat the Cavs, I think it went to 6 or 7. And one of the key moments was when It happened at a team meeting. The Warriors were getting ready for game 6 or 7, and a video intern suggested a defensive switch. A video intern suggested that they change up their defense. And Kerr listened, and they did, and it had an impact on the game. That invitation, like, think about all the stuff that goes before that invitation. You can call it belonging. I mean, you can call it that. Like, that intern clearly felt safe enough, psychologically safe enough to raise his hand and be courage and have courage and speak out. But mattering dials that in a little bit tighter. That intern knew he mattered. He's like, I have something to contribute. I'm excited to say it. And you just don't want people, belonging feels like a lower bar than mattering. And I think you're putting your finger on a really important thing. That intern felt like he mattered. And those people at Zingerman's, he showed them that they mattered, like through behavior, through action. And that's what I think ends up creating that sense of community that goes, even deeper than culture. I think, I guess that's to get you got me thinking now. I'm kind of returning to what's the difference between culture code and this book. This book is about the power of community. This book, which goes deeper than culture. It's more powerful, and it's more universal, and it's more primal. So yeah, that mattering is at the core of community.
I mean, I think that's why one of the biggest reasons we live where we live. My family, I'm originally from South Carolina. My wife's from Pennsylvania, but we've moved and settled here in Ireland because we live in an Irish town, and there's such a strong community that's centered around the Gaelic football and hurling club here in town that's been around since, 1830. And there's pubs that have been here that are older than America. But it's just like there is this sense of community that you feel. And when you have that community flourishing, it is oftentimes the feelings that might actually more accurately describe kind of the state of the family than oftentimes being in the rush and the busyness that we experienced in some great parts of America. But like in some of our towns there, it's just the busyness, the hustle, the lack of connection, for all the various reasons, right?
I know. And it's possible. I mean, what the book taught me was that it's possible to carve out that oasis even in this busy time. Even in this crazy world, our little piece of Ireland, that's what these places I visited did. They were good at using boundaries, good at pausing, good at creating these moments where people could slow down and turn it into their team, their organization, into something that was much more like a village than like a freeway, And modern life feels like an absolute freaking freeway, as we know. Right? More, faster, better, go, go, go. And our kids feel that, and our teams feel that. And yet, man, when you see a good team, they're not behaving that way. I mean, we just saw the, women's hockey team win gold last night. And it was just so cool to see the way they interacted after the game. They were just so tightly bonded, and they played like that. They played like a community. And that's that selflessness, that willingness to stretch yourself, that willingness to sacrifice. When you create an oasis of human connection, you can accomplish some great things.
Yeah, every coach is trying to create that sense of family within a sports team, right? And players say, "What do you want it to be like?" Oftentimes I'll ask the question of, what do you want this experience to be like this season? Mm-hmm. And the question is a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a family. Like, people want that. They are craving that.
Yeah.
When teams that I work with, when they do a phone-free day weekend meeting, especially a weekend retreat type thing, mm-hmm. They love it. They are crying out for it. They're like, thank you for taking away this device from me so that I could connect and be in community. It is such a timely book because people are craving this so much.
And I think it's I appreciate you saying that. And it's so, the experience over and over again is that it's not a big lift. Do you know what I mean? It's it feels very far away. Like, oh, that feeling of an oasis, a village is so far away. That feeling of deep connection. Newsflash, it ain't, like, as your experiences would show. And even, it's these little unnecessary pauses. I think the biggest enemy here is this worldview that everything has to have a purpose, and this worldview that everything has to be efficient, and this worldview that every habit has to automate some efficiency. it's not about automation, it's about animation. Like our world is really good at automating things, but it makes us feel hollowed out like a robot. We did all the stuff, but we didn't get any of the joy or connection. And like the New England Patriots this year, right? They went from being, I think, 4-13 to the Super Bowl. And all year long, they were talking about what a tight team they were and how incredible they were. Well, when you go back and rewind the tape, and one of the first days together, they did something called the 4-H exercise. Mike Vrabel had him do this. And it's a really simple exercise. You get together and you get into small groups and you talk about the 4-H's are your hero, your heartbreak, your history, and your hopes. So like, who's your hero? Is it your grandpa? Is it your first coach? Who's your hero? What's your heartbreak? What's something that you thought you were going to get and you didn't, and it destroyed you and you came back from that? What was your heartbreak? What's your history? Where's your family from? What's your background? And then what's your hope for the coming year? Super simple. It takes 15, 20 minutes, right? It's this weird pause. It doesn't make any sense because you're not at practice, right? You could obviously be way more efficient than doing that. And yet it switches on our relational attention. It changes the dynamics in the room. It creates vulnerability, deep connection, and it ends up being this little moment, right? And it's relationships and meaning aren't machines. They happen in moments. And so for leaders, the question you have is, how do I construct those moments? Like, what do they contain? What questions do I want my team to explore together? And it's not going to be something that you transmit to them. It's not going to be some inspiring speech or some video of, US hockey team 1980 that you show them. That's not it. They have to co-create the meaning. Meaning is a contact sport. Meaning is something that we do together. And so the question to you is, what question do you ask your team? What space do you create, whether it's through 4-H's or something else, that allows your team to zoom out from where they normally have their attention, which is, I'm a focus on little tasks and getting things done, to actually zooming out and say, what does this mean? Like, what matters here? What is the thing that is going to bind us? And it's not something you can impose on a team, but they have to co-create it. So it's almost like the coach isn't, like, the most important role of the coach is as a designer of those moments. Like, you think about those moments, think about the architecture of those moments, and your ability to create those, design those, and nurture those moments is like maybe the most underrated skill that any leader can have.
Well, there's two things, and I've talked about them on this podcast before, but there's two things I think every sports coach should do that I think they should get training that through executive coaching, because it helps you to ask better questions and just shut your mouth and listen. The other thing that I think is I got trained in recently in the last 5 years was facilitation. And I got that through an organization called 10 Directions. And I signed up for this facilitation because I was like, you know what? I want to be better at running workshops, and I'm thinking I'm going to go in there and understand how to like do cool activities and better improve my slide deck and all those things. And all I learned in that, none of that was all about actually just how to hold space, how to actually create the conditions. As you say a million times in your book, you talk about creating space, creating conditions for good things to happen, for conversations to emerge, for people to really, really listen. So when you talk about the 4-H's, which is a common activity action on sports teams, a lot of coaches might be going, oh, that's great. I take the prompt and I just hand my team share. But you observed, and you talk about it so much in your book, you're observing these people, and it's their way of being with their team as a facilitator. It's not necessarily just the prompt. It's not always just about the question. It's maybe how we are creating conditions. Maybe you could speak to that. What are some things that we should, if let's say a coach does the 4-H's or any activity like that, what are the things they want to do to create the conditions for, that connection, that vulnerability to emerge?
Yeah, I love that. Well, there's a couple things that come to mind right away. The one is your vulnerability, you being open. To have a coach who does this, if you're going to ask your players to do it, you got to do it too, right? Your vulnerability. We always think that, you got to build up trust before you can be vulnerable, but we have that exactly wrong, right? Vulnerability, when shared, creates trust, creates connection. Think about the most important relationships in your life. They're not ones where you were never vulnerable, where you're never vulnerable. They're ones where you were vulnerable, where you struggled. So being open about that. The second thing is to kind of have a deep curiosity about it. There is that tendency that you're putting your finger right on, which is like, okay, we're going to do this like a drill. What happens in a drill? We're accomplishing that task. No, it's a bunch of doorways. What you're trying to do is create a space where they can start to get curious about each other, where they can explore those questions, where they can kind of build those relationships. And so if you approach it, there's a quote that this scientist told me in the book that I think of all the time now, which is the type of attention we bring to the world determines the world that we find. If we bring narrow, controlling attention to the world, we find just sort of a flat world that we can manipulate, and we get frustrated when it doesn't obey us. But if we bring curiosity, wide, warm curiosity, and keep asking, what's happening here right now? What is this? Oh, look, that kid I thought was quiet is actually kind of a leader. Let's explore that. That's interesting. This kid that I thought was a leader is really shy. That's interesting. Let's explore that. Let's talk about that. Let's park that in my mind so that I can explore that further later. Let's think about what the next possible meaningful connection might be. Let's try to think about how we set up our locker room. Do we set up our locker rooms to facilitate this kind of stuff? Does our schedule facilitate meaningful relationships? Like your task as a coach is to create meaningful moments all the time. And if you're bleeding all the life out of your schedule by filling it with activity, by never pausing to talk about things, by never having, you can create meaning by having the AAR after practice, right? And just say, hey, how do you guys think that went? If you could change one thing, what would it be about that practice we just had, right? Whoa, wait a minute, I'm a contributor now, right? I matter. These mattering moments can be created on the fly. They can be created with intentionality. And most of them, and this is why curiosity, the stance of curiosity is so vital, because all good stuff happens through questions. Like our culture worships at the altar of answers, and good coaches are clearly knowledgeable. Good leaders are clearly knowledgeable, but the ones who are the best are the ones who know enough that they are focused on creating and posing deep questions to people, deep questions that they don't know the answer to, questions that are, questions like, what's energizing you about this project right now? There's no clear answer to that. Like, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to your team being successful this year? What does a great Tuesday look like for us? Like, let's paint the picture. What does a great Tuesday look like for us? Those are all questions that aren't seeking to control. They're questions that are genuinely curious. And those coaches who ask those questions and create those conversations they're actually in the connective energy business, right? We know that great teams have high level of connective energy and that they can be malleable and self-organize around things. Creating that connective energy is not an accident. They're constantly activating their relational attention. They're constantly creating these question that allows people to step into uncertainty together. And that's what makes you come alive. It's, answers drive us apart. Questions bring us together and make us alive.
So we are going to take a break in our conversation with Daniel Coyle. Before we go, though, I think it's vital that we have actionable ways to create flourishing within our team. So here is my recommendation. Join TOC Coach. When you are a member of TOC Coach, you're not just getting the tools, you're getting the step-by-step guides to facilitate team flourishing. And these are some of the best activities that I don't just do with elite sports teams. They're activities I do with my daughter's under 11s football team. So wherever context you coach in, you will find them valuable. But you don't just get that. When you're in TOC Coach, you also get a community and a team of people like myself. I host weekly office hours a couple times a week where you can just pop in, ask me questions. I'll help you plan some team events. So join TOC Coach. There's links in the details of this episode, or you can go to tocculture.com to learn more. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss part 2 of my conversation with Coyle. You're going to love it. We're unpacking one of my favorite conversations, which is around safe spaces and brave spaces, the difference, and how we are getting psychological safety wrong. Really powerful conversation. So thanks again for listening in.